Today we're talking beginner latte art with the Breville Dual Boiler. I'll end up showing you 2 easy patterns that you can work with and hopefully you can have some success at home. We've got our Smart Grinder Pro here and the basic accessories from Breville that you'd buy as a pack. I'm gonna give you a whole bunch of tips and tricks so that you can make amazing latte art at home on this machine. Before we get into it, let us know if you've got a Breville Dual Boiler or another model from Breville and how you're going in frothing milk and pouring latte art. So what we have here in front of us is a pretty typical Breville kit. We've got our Smart Grinder Pro over here and we've got our Champion blend in there. Now the recipe that we're going to be using for that today is 18.5 grams of coffee. We're going for a 2:1 ratio and I've set actually the single button here to give us an extraction at 25 seconds with that perfect 2:1 yield. So that's a good tip for you if you're trying to get beautiful coffee before you start to pour out latte art. We've got the dual boiler set just a standard setting. So we're using their pre-infusion and there's no real changes that we've done on the water temperature of the machine. We've got their standard jug. I've never poured latte art or even frothed in this jug before. I'm really interested to see how I'm going to go with it and then we'll talk about the shape and the design and how you can improve. We're going to use a latte glass and just a standard cup and we've got the beautiful little mat there so we protect our table. So let's pull a shot and pour out some latte art. So before you make any espresso, you've got to have a hot handle. So make sure it's clean, dry and hot before you get any grinding to it. We're going about 15 seconds of grind. It's on the fine setting number 6. So if that gives you an idea of how you can set up your grind, we're using our medium roast blend here as well. Look at your grind, you can see it is quite clumpy. Just give a bit of a collapse there. If you had a WDT or anything else you could do, it'd be good to look to work with that coffee a little bit. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a tap there, getting the standard tamper. I'm just going to level it out a little bit just to fill in some gaps. So again, appreciate we don't have too many tools here today, but just by leveling it out and fixing these little gaps around the outside, we're going to reduce some channeling. Another little tap, and we'll give that a tamp. Just firm till it stops, and a bit of a turn. Clean up your mess, and pop it in the machine. Now it's all about timing, so as soon as you get that coffee in, start your extraction. You've got plenty of time to grab your cups and pop them underneath. If you're rushing to get those cups underneath, you definitely need to go much finer on your grind and get some sort of pre-infusion. There you go, 22-second shot. Have a look at our extraction quickly. It's not super pale, it's just started to go light. So we've got a nice dark color there to start with. That's great for latte art. Let's get some fresh milk. Fresh local cold milk is definitely the way to go, and full cream if you can. If you're doing a light option, you're gonna find it's gonna separate a little bit and become a bit more like a marshmallow foam. It's a bit harder to work with. When we pour it in, we wanna go just below the spout. That's the first point of reference that we're gonna use when we're gonna be frothing. Whenever you're frothing, you do need a cloth. So you want to purge first to get any air out and any water so that when we actually start to steam, we're not adding too much more water into our milk. So give it a good squirt. You can put it into a cloth. If you just wrap your cloth around, pop it in the drip tray, that'll be nice and safe. And ooh, that's not a cool touch wand. So highly recommend using this little silicone holder here. It's got a finger hole, it's pretty good. So that'll stop you from getting the burn. But you have to use the cloth afterwards to give it a really good wipe. Let's froth some milk. So I'm going to come off on a 45-degree angle, and you can see that that spout is coming down on a bit of an angle. We don't want to be right down and straight. We need to get this to start spinning. And by the shape of this pot, it's very round. So it's going to be a bit tricky to get that steaming. So let's see what we can do for this first experience. I'm going to keep the spout in the actual steam wand, and I'm going to locate it just off to the third, and I'm finding at the minute this spout is actually hitting underneath that steamer there, so that's actually not letting me go deep enough. So I'm going to have to go past that little steamer and make sure that the whole tip is actually under the milk. So let's turn that on and see if we can get this to spin. You've got to get it spinning. There you go, it's spinning, and we're not getting any hiss yet, so we're not generating any froth. Now we're going to start to lower it down by sliding the tip down the steam wand, keeping that spin, and now we're going to get the hiss. So now we're introducing a some cavitation essentially, or skimming the surface of the milk, and we're getting some actual stretching happening. Got to maintain that spin. Now these machines take a little bit longer to froth. You know, a commercial machine can be quite quick. Having longer time and getting it in the right spot is the key to making good milk. So you can see that the volume's risen. It's almost coming out the top of the jug. I'm going to just lift it back up and keep that spinning till it's too hot to touch. 1, 2, and 3, and turn it off. Okay, put your jug down, let the milk rest. That's the first tip I'm going to give you. The other one is clean up. We don't want to have any milk build up on these little tips under there, and make sure you give it a good purge to get the milk out. It does suck back up inside here, and we don't want to block up the steamer for next time. So let's have a look at the quality of the milk. You can see that there's a few little bubbles on there. And what we can do is we can actually tap those out like milk fireworks. Then you give it a swirl. Now by allowing it to rest that amount of time, the bubbles have risen to the top. So we've got some pretty silky milk. And the best way to assess your milk is have a look at the side of the jug. So when you're swirling, have a look at how many bubbles or different bubbles you have up the side. You can see 1, 2, or 3 up the side there, but essentially we've got a very consistent hiss. Now, if you've got lots of different shaped bubbles there, when you're hissing, you're going so you're getting a big hiss and a small hiss, and that's creating different bubble sizes. So you want to maintain a constant little hiss to get that silky milk. Now, we've got our 2 coffees here. They've been sitting here for a little bit. Now, I'm going to pour out this first set, then we'll go through and do this in one seamless transaction, because we don't want to have our espresso sitting too long, nor do we want to have our milk sitting too long. So timing is key. So make sure that you've got your espresso and your milk ready to go. Don't be fumbling around trying to do anything in between these moments. Keep that milk spinning. We're going to do our latte first. I'm going to give our espresso a bit of a swirl, and let's just see what we can pour out. We're going to tilt our cup on an angle. We're going to pour in, get a bit of a base around the cup, come back and pour out. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a pattern there, but definitely we didn't maintain much of that crema. I'm going to show you what happens with this next cup. We're going to swirl our espresso again, and we're going to pour out. We're going to, again, try and create a bit of a base here, get around the cup, or a canvas, and then we're going to go low, and the milk's going to start to come back out. Here we go, and you can come up and pull through. All right, so that's my first attempt of frothing and pouring on the Breville Dual Boiler here. Now, if you come down and have a look at here, this is a really tricky cup to pour. You can see that we got so much foam in there, and I couldn't really deal with it. I needed to be able to have less foam in this latte to be able to actually control a better pattern. In our next cup, we actually have a lot less foam in it, and I'll show you with a bit of a spoon and a bit of a trick so you can learn how to test this. So let's assess how much foam's in this second cup. I've just got a spoon here, and I'm going to pop it in, and we're going to pull it back. Now you can see the liquid underneath. It's basically a flat white. We haven't got 2 lattes. If we had 2 lattes in front of us, we'd want to have the even amount of milk between the 2 cups. Now the best way to do that is splitting your milk. So this is another great tip that you've got to think about. When you're frothing, you're either going to froth for the exact cup that you're going to be pouring out and just froth for 1, or if you're going to froth for 2 cups, make sure you can split the foam between the 2. Starting with a smaller jug is a bit easier. You can lower the level of milk that you start with, and then try and measure how far up you're going to come when you're creating your hiss so that you can get the right amount of foam for a flat white, latte or cappuccino. And the biggest tip I can give you is if you're wanting a cappuccino, start with less milk. If you're after a flat white, have more milk, and the more hiss you get, the more foam you're going to have. If you're spilling out all over the top of your jug, you've got way too much foam. So start to get less hiss and control that vortex spin, and you're going to get a much silkier milk to be able to pour with. So let's run through this in one sequence and show you all about the timing. So I'll lock in our handle, hit on our shots. I've got 2 latte glasses so we can see how much foam we've got. We're going to get our milk out, and we're going to think about splitting this. So I'm going to pour again to the same point, just where the spout starts. Now I'm going to still froth with this machine, with this jug I should say. It's not too bad, but there's definitely some things that I'll be able to show you in the pouring of the next jug. We're going to use the second jug to pour with. We give it a purge, get that water out. Again, right up here on the silicon's the best spot for this machine, and the tip just under the liquid. I'm going to pop that on, and you'll see straight away that spins. I'm going to get our hiss. And all I'm doing is I'm just sliding down the actual steam wand. I'm not tilting the jug because I want that vortex to keep spinning at the same spot. It's creeping up one side a little bit, and to fix that, just drop your steam wand down a bit more. There you go, have a look at this. See? Okay, now that's getting hot. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to turn that off. Let it sit. Clean up again. And purge. Okay, now we've got 2 lattes there with some crema to work with, which is great. So same again, we're going to let the bubbles rise to the top. We're going to tap it like a hammer on the bench, and you will get some milk fireworks on your hands there. Give it a swirl. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour off just some foam off the top. I'll use that for the second cup. All right, let's pour a nice heart on the top of this coffee. Swirl our espresso, swirl our milk, tilt our cup, pour in low, get a bit of a base happening, come back to the middle and start to wiggle a little bit left and right, and just stay there. Take a breath, then lift up and pull through. So you've got to stay in the cup to be able to get it to go wide and fat. If you lift up, you're going to reduce the pour. By going low, it'll start to come out wide and create that big base for the heart. Now, I don't want this to sit for too long, so I'm going to actually pour the foam back into the original jug, which is what we call double jugging. Tap out a few more little bubbles I might have created, and we're going to practice wiggling a little bit here. So we're going to do a little bit different. We're going to pour in, create our base, get around the cup. Go low and pour at a speed that you can wiggle, 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 wiggle left and right, and then I'm going to stop and pull through. Okay, now I might have run out of milk, and that's a good thing to understand, is knowing how much milk you're going to need for the 2 cups, because you never want to fall short on a latte art pattern. If you want to impress your friends, make sure you've got enough liquid in your jug before you finish that pour, because it is a bit embarrassing when you run low. But if you have a look here, you'll be able to see that by splitting the milk, we actually have the right amount of foam for each cup. So that's a really handy tip that I can teach you to start to perfect your latte art. Now I said we're going to show you 2 easy patterns. We've covered some techniques essentially, and I want to just take it to the next level. So what we're going to do is we're going to extract the same coffee, but we're only going to put it into 1 cup, and we're going to froth the right amount of milk and foam for the 1 glass. But I'm going to pour out of a different different jug actually, I should say. So we're going to purge again. We'll start getting this steam happening. Now I've started with lower amount of milk. The latte we've got here is a little bit larger, but what we're actually going to achieve is we're going to have a much denser, thicker, richer crema now, because we've actually done a double shot in 1 cup. So that's the other thing people forget about when trying to pour latte art is, do you have enough crema because you're splitting into 2 glasses? So you literally don't have enough base espresso or crema to deal with to have those different variations between the white and the caramel color we're trying to look for. Whoa, there was a slip. I was just lightly pushing on that steam wand and it moved. So I'm just now going to focus on trying to blend those bubbles back in. I call those high-speed bubbles. We'll probably see those ones at the start here. There you go. There you go. There you can see those on the top there. There's quite a few of them. But they're going to pop and dissipate. If you did that all the time, you would have a problem. And you definitely don't want to do hissing towards the end of your extractions. So we can tap those out, give that a swirl. There you go. It's come back pretty good. So we've got a really great amount of crema here. I'm going to take this jug and pour it all off. So this is double jugging essentially. And let's pour out with a different jug, and then I'll talk about that afterwards. So we're going to swirl our crema, swirl our milk, pour in, get around the cup, come back to the middle. and pull through. Woo! I filled that one up. There you go. What I wanted to demonstrate there was the amount of control I could get while wiggling and how fine it could be out of this jug. So one thing that we found being able to pour with this standard Breville jug is there's not much of a ridge here for the foam to enter into the pouring spout. It's a bit hard to deal with. So you basically are getting foam and milk, and the tip here, it's kind of a tight little tip, which is a good little thing that we look for, but it's not a very deep valley. So if you have a look at the differences between these two jugs, you can see that we can control the foam a lot better. And that's what makes latte art pouring much easier. The other thing about the shape of the jug is it's very straight all the way up. It's not condensing that foam as we created in the jug. Like this one here, you can see that it actually does taper up, which helps us with a lot more control. So it creates the foam to be more dense and more controllable when we're trying to pour. So it's a lot easier to be able to pour and get much finer lines with those little differences in a jug. All right, so we're going to use this jug to froth in and pour in. We're going to use a double shot, so we've got a nice amount of crema. And let's see how much improvement I can get just by changing these little things. Again, this jug's spinning just as we have been seeing there, lowering it to get a nice hiss. And you only really want to get that hiss up to 40 degrees of milk temperature, or when it just starts to get warm. If you get any more hiss after that, you won't be able to have time to fold those bubbles back in through the milk like I'm doing now, where there's no hiss and we're just getting that vortex spin. That's the key part. If you keep getting hiss all the way to the end, you're never going to have silky milk to be able to pour with. Keeping end temperature below 65 degrees is going to make your latte art a lot better. Ooh, lost the cloth. But if you go hotter, it's going to separate the foam. So it's a much harder thing. So don't put yourself under too much pressure trying to have a hot coffee and pour great latte art. You're basically going against the tide. Okay, so we've got our double espresso here. We're going to swirl that, tap and swirl our milk. Now when you get really good milk, it actually can settle for a lot longer. And have a look at the quality of that. Look at the side, there's no other bubbles in there. It's just one consistent bubble all the way through. So that is perfect milk. So if anyone tells you that you can't get good milk on a Breville dual boiler like this, well, you can turn around and say to them, it all comes down to the technique and the practice of the person. So let's pour out a pattern here. So we're going to swirl our espresso. We're going to get in here and create our base. Go around the cup. I'm going to start to wiggle. I'm going to stop. I'm going to put another blob in, and a third blob, and then pull through the three of them. There you go. So I guess the answer is, can you make good latte art on a Breville dual boiler? Well, yes, you can. It just needs some progression and practice to be able to achieve these kinds of results. So a simple heart is where you should be starting. Then try and create that round fat heart like I showed in the first designs. Then if you can start that, stop, pull the jug up and out and put another blob in, that's going to start some progressions to see what I've just done here in stacking the 4 different hearts together. Once you get to the very last heart, you're lifting up and pulling through all of those together to make yourself a beautiful tulip. So that is very silky milk, I must admit. I haven't really ever been able to achieve that in these kind of machines before. If I was getting that in the cafe, I would be totally stoked. That is beautiful, silky milk. And with a little bit more practice in this machine, I'm sure I could keep pouring a whole range of patterns. So a quick little recap with you across all the coffees I've just made. By using the first set of espressos and frothing with the jugs, we got way too much foam in one cup and not enough in the other, which I couldn't control the amount of foam there. So then with the next one, we decided to look at being able to split the amount of milk, but we still poured out of the Breville jug. We just couldn't get the control that we were looking for. There wasn't much detail in these 2 cups. By being able to froth in the Breville jug and pour out of the other small rhino jugs we have here, it's a much finer tip and you can see the detail starting to come through. And we also managed to get a full, beautiful latte when we used a different jug. You can see we've got the right amount of foam, it's silky, it's glossy, the pattern's nice and detailed, and the control was there. So if you're looking to try and develop your skills, just look at the extra little tools that you could apply to your kit. As simple as a $15 jug that has the right shape is really going to improve your latte art. So if you've got any questions about the Breville Dual Boiler or the grinder, or there's other things that you want to know about the Breville range and some content that perhaps that we could produce for you, please let us know in the comments below. We want to hear what you want from us. So we're looking to develop more content to make sure that you have a great experience at home. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this has helped you see the progression that you can have with a Breville Dual Boiler machine and know kind of where you're at in some progress steps as well. So thanks very much for watching. If you haven't yet, please do like and subscribe or share this with your mates. So if you go around to someone's house and have a cup of coffee and they're giving you this kind of latte art, you've got the tips for them. It's definitely going to help them progress so they can pour you that beautiful pattern next time you're there. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.